Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to review a few problems from sections 8.4 and 8.5, which talked about multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting fractions, or rational expressions. So go ahead and take out a blank piece of paper and write down these problems and work them out with me so that you have more practice problems to look at. And then you will work on a review worksheet to also give you more practice to work on these types of problems. So if you need to pause at any time to copy things down or get out your paper, go ahead and do that. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is a multiplication problem. So remember in this one, the very first step is to factor everything. So in the top left here, we need to factor that, and we can use a shortcut because there's a 1 in front of x squared. So you're asking what multiplies to give you 20 and adds to give you negative 9. So hopefully you are saying x minus 5 and x minus 4. Then this bottom multiplies to 14, adds to 9. Hopefully you have x plus 7, x plus 2. Multiply. Top right, what multiplies to give you 8 and adds to give you 6. So x plus 4, x plus 2. And on the bottom, what multiplies to give you negative 20 and adds to be negative 1. You're going to have x minus 5 and x plus 4. So negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, and negative 5 plus 4 is the negative x. So we first factor everything. Then we're going to look at our denominator, or denominators, there's more than one, to get our restrictions. So if you look here, if you set each of these parentheses equal to 0 and solve, those are your restrictions. So x cannot equal negative 7, negative 2, 5, or negative 4. So x can be any other numbers in the real number system except for these, because if it's any one of those, it will make one of these denominator 0, which makes it undefined. You can't do that. Okay, next, then we get to cancel things out. You can cancel straight up and down. So if you look in this fraction straight up and down, we can get rid of the x plus 4s. In this fraction, straight up and down, nothing. We can also cancel along diagonals. So there's that and that. And then on this diagonal, we can get rid of that and that. Okay? So then our answer is going to be whatever is left over, which on top is the x minus 4, and on the bottom is the x plus 7. Now in my answer I dropped the parentheses, but remember these are still invisible parentheses that are around these, and you can't just cancel these x's out. And then there's your final answer. Oops. Okay. All right, now let's do a division problem. So very similar to multiplication, we first factor everything that we can. So that 9x squared can't be factored. What about here? What can we divide out of 6x minus 3? You can divide out of 3. So then when you divide, 6 divided by 3 is 2, so 2x. Negative 3 divided by 3 is minus 1. I'm going to keep division for now. What about the top right? What can we divide out as a GCF in the top right? 3x. And so when you divide that out, you get x minus 4 left over. And then on the bottom right, we can take out an x. So that's 2x minus the coefficient on that x is 1, so there is a placeholder of 1 still there. Okay, so let's look for restrictions. So this 3 does not give you a restriction because it doesn't have a variable next to it. But if you set this equal to 0 and solve, you would add 1 and divide by 2. So 1/2 is a restriction. This x, though, will give you a 0 restriction. And then this is still going to be positive 1/2. Now for division, the new thing, though, that we have to do, because you cannot cancel until this is a multiplication sign, so then what am I supposed to do? The first one stays the same, and then we multiply by the reciprocal of the second one. That's the same equivalent to dividing by that. So then I flip. Now you have to recheck this new denominator to see if there's any new restrictions. 0 is 1, we already have that, but then also 4 now is a restriction. So positive 4 is there as well. Now let's look at it and see if there's anything that we can cancel. And on this diagonal, we can get rid of the 2x minus 1s. Straight up and down here, I can get rid of these x's. Can't cancel the 3's across because they have to be either diagonal or straight up and down. But we could simplify this 3 and this 9. So 3 goes into 9 3 times. You would put the 3 on top there. And then if you look again, I have a 3 here and a 3 here. So then I can simplify 3 goes into 3 once. So we could cancel again. So what's left on top? We have x squared. And then on bottom, we don't have anything except for the x minus 4 left. And again, this x minus 4 is in parentheses, so you cannot cancel any of these x's with this x down here. And there's your answer. Okay? So that was multiplication and division. The next one we're going to work on is addition and subtraction. So first we need to look here. Remember, when you're adding and subtracting fractions, you need like denominators. When we multiplied and divide, we did not care about like denominators. You do not need them. But when you add and subtract, you definitely need to have like denominators. So looking here, notice you have the same denominator. So that's less work for us. So that just carries over. It does not change. I'm going to wait to factor in the end on this problem. You could factor first if you would like to, but I'll wait until the end. And then now that we have like denominators, you just add the like terms. So 2x plus x, that makes 3x. Again, please do not try and take out this whole 3x and this whole 3x and say your answer is 1/3. Since you see a plus sign here, there are invisible parentheses, so why don't you go ahead and put those in there to remind you that you do not cancel those out. Now that we have one fraction, we're going to try and simplify and cancel and all that good stuff we did before. So on the bottom, I can take out a 3, so 3x is still on top, and now I'm taking out a GCF of 3 here, which then leaves x plus 1. Okay, I'm going to do my restrictions. So the only restriction is that x cannot equal -1, because I set this equal to 0 and solve, and I get -1. This 3 in front does not have an x with it, so it does not give me a restriction of 0. Okay, and so now we try to cancel some stuff, which we can, because now this 3 is outside of the parenthesis, and this 3 is not glued to this because there's no addition or subtraction. So then you can cancel those 3's on the outside, because there are no invisible parentheses around here because you don't see a plus or a minus sign. So you can cancel the 3's. And so then my answer is x over x plus 1. Okay, so that's what you do if they're like denominators. So that's super easy. Like denominators, we like those. Now our last problem is going to be reminding you how to do with unlike denominators. Okay, so now we have unlike denominators. Well, I'm going to go ahead and factor, because since these are not the same, I'm going to have to figure out what my common denominator is going to be, and it's not going to be quite just putting this binomial next to this binomial. So I'm going to go ahead and factor this, and this is now going to become x plus 5, x minus 5. So then my least common denominator, so notice they both have x minus 5, so we need that. And then one of them has x plus 5 and the other doesn't, so then we also need to include the x plus 5. Now we do not need to include x minus 5 twice. Since it's already there once, you just need to put it up once. So then my least common denominator is going to be both of these parentheses. So when you look, that's your first step. If you look in your notes for adding and subtracting, is finding the least common denominator if they're not the same. Next, step 2 means we need to multiply to change the denominator. So if you look at this first one, I have x minus 5. So what am I missing from the LCD that needs to also go down there? So that would be x plus 5. So that means I need to multiply top and bottom of this fraction by x plus 5. So that means I need to distribute this to get my new numerator. So that'll be 3x squared plus 15x. Now this one I don't want to keep in the factored form because we're going to try and combine it with some like terms if there's any other like terms. So then I need to go ahead and distribute there, but I'm going to keep my denominator in the factored form. You don't need to refoil that out. This one already has the LCD, so then I just bring this down and don't have to do anything with that. So now let's make this one fraction. So the denominator just carries over. Ooh, how'd that happen? Okay, so then I'm going to subtract like terms, but if you look here, I have a 3x squared, a 15x, and a 2. None of those are like terms, so then I'll just put it in standard form. So 3x squared plus 15x, and then that'll be minus 2, because there's a minus sign in front. Okay? Now, erase that, because this is not canceled out or anything. Just showed up that way. So then that was x minus 5 there. Okay, so now we are on to step 4. So we've already made this one fraction. Step 4 in your notes says to factor if you can, cancel some things out, do the restrictions, all that stuff that we did the previous day on Monday. So then here, we cannot just do a shortcut with this, find the multiples of -2 that gives you 15, because there's a 3 in front of the x squared instead of a 1. So you need to do 3 times -2 is -6. But when you start to list your factors, you've got 2 and 3, 6 and 1. Do any of these factors add, even if you put negative signs somewhere, would they add to be 15? No, they wouldn't. So this is not factorable, so you don't need to do anything since it's not factorable. So then my restrictions, look at the denominator. X cannot equal positive or -5. And I'm not going to be able to cancel anything because since I see plus and minus signs here, that means this trinomial is glued together. So I can't try and cancel anything out here, so then that is going to be your final answer. 3x squared plus 15x minus 2 all over x plus 5 times the quantity x minus 5. So there's just some times where you can't factor any further and you won't be able to cancel anything out. Okay, so we've done a few more problems to remind you what to do. So you're going to work on your worksheet, and it's actually going to review section 8.1 as well, but you guys did pretty good on 8.1, so I didn't do any review problems from that section. So this is kind of our midway point review for chapter 8, and then we'll start graphing when I come back.